Say I'm excited, so excited to have our friends from Suffolk. And just to, I want to give you a little heads up. So a lot of people, and many people in this room, were glad that they were coming. We're excited to hear what they had to say and what's been going on in Suffolk. And I also had the typical players that wanted to push back and say, well, that doesn't have anything to do with Virginia Beach. Why have them come? Let me tell you, it has everything to do with Virginia Beach. If you've been politically engaged in the last year, maybe two, the lawfare that's been going on that is rampant in our country is happening right in your own backyards. There's lawfare here in Virginia Beach. There is lawfare that happened in Suffolk. This is how we connect our allies across the state. We hear, so if we have people come, maybe from Loudoun County City Council, and they speak about something that they were dealing with in Loudoun County. It didn't happen in Virginia Beach yet, but do we need to wait for it to happen before we can address it? No. This is how we connect as activists and principled conservatives to stop the radical behavior that's been going on throughout our state and certainly throughout our country. So I want to make it very clear that them being here is extremely appropriate. It's extremely appropriate because this connects all the political, and it doesn't matter if you feel like you're a Democrat. It doesn't matter if you feel like you're a Libertarian. It doesn't matter if you feel like you're a Republican. This is a nonpartisan room, and all of that activity can absolutely be shared in this room. And it educates each and every one of you to be more engaged and more informed activists. So I want to address the negativity of it because they think it's a dead subject, but certain people are still sending out emails referring to Suffolk, and I'm going to let Suffolk tell their own story. But to introduce them, I'm going to do a very brief introduction of both. Both of them are extremely good friends of mine. I am happy to work side by side with them and help them in Suffolk as much as I am happy to be with all of you here in Virginia Beach and to help you with the same issues and working precincts and helping candidates and all that implies. I'm happy to do it here, but I'm also happy to help our allies in Suffolk. Dawn Jones is here. She is the new chairman of the 1974 Coalition. She just informed me tonight that they got the name of the 1974 Coalition because that's the year Suffolk became a city. How exciting. So that's a great way to name your organization because that's when Suffolk became a city. She's an activist. I met her along the political trail. A fire of her own. I always tell her, gosh, I love her because she is such a firebrand. She's a hardcore conservative. She is a leader, in my opinion, to be reckoned with. And she leads a lot of people in a lot of the educational programs that they have in Suffolk. She is the former chair of the Suffolk GOP. And again, I'm thrilled to have her. She does live in Suffolk. She's been there for how many years?
28 years.
28 years? Okay. Now, my other friend is Miller Cary, and I met him first. And I'm going to tell you, you will never find a more godly, principled person than my friend Miller Cary, a native of Suffolk. And I notice when I hang out with him, I want to be a better person. He is a hardcore Second Amendment activist, and that's how he got engaged in politics. I actually met him on the campaign trail when he was, I think, the vice chair of the Suffolk GOP in 2021, and then he became the chair of the Suffolk GOP, and then Dawn took over from Miller after that. You will never find a more greater group of people that are the literally salt of the earth, just like you are here, that have the same passions and the same concerns for their family, their budgets, their city, that you have right here in Suffolk. So you do, in Virginia Beach, you do share that with them. And again, lifelong citizen of Suffolk. His wife is there. He's a great father. I get to talk to him about that all the time. And a very principled conservative. He was very active during the Second Amendment when all the sanctuary city stuff was going on. That's what got Miller Cary engaged. And it's been an amazing ride with them ever since. It has been a privilege to know them, and I cannot wait for you to hear their story. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Miller Cary and Dawn Jones, our two guest speakers. And again, we're not going to record. We just have our recordings and our Facebook Live. We are going to allow you to ask questions at the end, so please don't think you won't be able to have that chance. Miller, Dawn, the show is yours.
Thank you, Waverly. That was, did everybody hear me okay? That was maybe overly generous. Thank you. It did help salve my hurt feelings, what I just learned about the 1974 Coalition, which I thought was named after me since I was born. I guess everybody's heard the saying that sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. And today I have a truth to share that's crazy. And some of this truth is so crazy that the person who comes to tell it to you is going to sound a little crazy. And that's probably why Waverly has us here, so that she's not the only one that sounds crazy in this room telling that truth. But anyway, I'll share it and let the Lord do with it what He will. They called it the Blue Wave. It was 2019. A Democrat strategist group called Flippable already had Virginia in its crosshairs. And after a much publicized shooting in this city, Democratic resources from around the country flooded the Old Dominion, including millions from gun control nut Michael Bloomberg. How many of y'all remember him the next year in 2020 bragging that when he sought the nomination for the presidential race, that he had flipped Virginia with his millions of dollars? He was very proud of that. Too bad for Bloomberg, though, in that year, because it was good for everyone else. The pendulum swung back so hard during that legislative session when they tried to push so much crazy gun control at one time. The Democrats, come that summer and fall, would not dare mention it the rest of the year. Gun control. Tens of thousands, some estimated 100,000, attended VCDL's lobby day in Richmond in January. And by October, gun control was barely whispered by Democrats during the heated election season. Brady PAC, it's a PAC for an organization dedicated solely to the interest of taking away gun owner rights, ran ads about health care. They didn't dare mention gun control that year. That's how powerful the Second Amendment movement in Virginia was that year. So what happened? If this strong conservative voting bloc had existed in Virginia before 2020, and it had, then how had it not had this effect before? Hold on to that, because we'll come back to that in a few minutes. So in January 2020, just before the VCDL lobby day, I saw an advertisement for the Suffolk Republican Party meeting for that month. I grew up in Suffolk. I'd been there 40-some years at that point, and had never been to a Suffolk Republican Party meeting. In fact, I was really, I disliked politics, still dislike it. But I began to realize that if not me, then who? And that's part of stewarding this great country we have, is to get up and be involved. So I went. I'd heard many in recent months through the Second Amendment fight. A lot of people ask, where's the Republican Party in all this? In our desperate but successful fight to protect the Second Amendment. And there were 12 people there. It was kind of sad. Vice Chairman Thomas Turner, whom I'd never met, opened the meeting with the remark that this was the largest turnout they'd seen in some time. What? He wasn't kidding. And it turned out that half the room were visiting candidates or their representatives. During business, it was revealed by the chairman, Steve Trent, that for the first time in 20 years, the Suffolk Republican Party was going to have to raise money. That didn't make sense. He confessed that Delegate Chris Jones, an incumbent, had solely funded the party at his own insistence for 20 years. After the meeting, two officers who apparently had seen me speak before City Council during a Second Amendment fight approached me. One asked me to run for school board. The other asked if I'd consider succeeding him as vice chair, as he was planning to move on. That was Thomas Turner, again, whom I'd never met. It was really kind of strange and something to take in. In the coming weeks, I saw firsthand how Turner behaved in a very nasty way to conservative activists, particularly from the 2A movement. A general message seeming to be, congratulations on your recent single-issue activism, but leave real politics to those of us who knock the doors. The absurdity of his bully arrogance, speaking from such a weak and brittle pulpit to a group that could so overwhelmingly outnumber, outwork, outperform this weak group he was in, that notably met at a funeral home. How fitting. It weighed on me heavily. And my initial thought was, well, I guess this isn't the group for me. Or was it? Some other things had happened in my life at that point, and I'd walked away from a 25-year volunteer commitment. And I began to wonder, is this what I'm supposed to do? I consulted with various compatriots from the 2A movement. The founding chair of the Hampton Roads Tea Party had been a big help there in Suffolk. That's somebody I talked to and got good advice from. A friend of mine in the Trump administration. And after that, I calmly announced to Thomas Turner that I had the numbers to take over the Suffolk GOP, and that I would. So I'm going to try and keep a very long story not so long, leaving out some. So I began building the party. Every month as I reached out to known conservatives, I heard stories about how the old leadership had driven them away, how people would resolve not to be part of such a group, but were glad to give it a try with the old leadership out of the way. Meetings drew crowds from several localities away just to see what was going on. Suffolk became an important stop for candidates for regional and statewide offices. I think I left out before, that group, which I found out later had historically for about 20 years been a dozen or so members. They often, in their bylaws, 12 was the quorum. And they often spent 45 minutes texting and calling friends to get a quorum if they had something important to vote on. Although the meeting I was at was 12, and that was the biggest they'd seen in a while. I don't know how they really voted stuff in. That grew in the next year and a half to 156 paid members. We're applauding the Lord on that as far as I'm concerned. In the treasury, for a group that had not had to fundraise, nobody there knew how to fundraise, hadn't done it in 20 years. And now that well was dry because Chris Jones had been voted out. The treasury was pretty soon over 20,000. So 1,000% increase in membership and 1,000% increase, nearly 1,000% increase in the treasury in that first year or so. Things were hopping. Suffolk became an important stop for candidates for regional and statewide offices, but it also was treacherous for rhinos. Vic has probably witnessed this there, because Suffolk Republicans were not just conservative, but informed. Candidates came to know that to gain favor in Suffolk, they would have to faithfully advance conservative values in the legislative session and speaking with the media. Because when they gave milquetoast platitudes or betrayed conservative values in the chamber, they'd be taken to task in front of about 100 people or so when they came to Suffolk. And it was beautiful. It was... I don't share this out of bloodlust, but it was conservative values being upheld and people that we elect being held against that, accountable in front of people and having to answer for it. And some people who'd gotten really comfortable and smooth with their words were suddenly stumbling. And I think it was good because it made them think. And some of the best candidates really shined in it. We recruited, cultivated, and empowered local candidates, put expectations out there, then gave them the resources to win. We didn't hand them victories, mind you. We empowered them to do it themselves. In the community, we fed first responders. We promoted and donated to the Crisis Pregnancy Center. Gave them a forum to share their message too. By the way, can I mention that?
You can. We have announcements towards the end.
I'll keep on going.
Yeah.
When a local black church was about to have to cancel a semi-monthly food drive because of short resources, we stepped in on a moment's notice with food and volunteers, and a couple days later handed out food to a community depending on it. Months later, Glenn Youngkin and Winsome Sears had a faith leaders rally at that church during the heat of his campaign. Mind you, this church had no previous affiliation with the Suffolk Republican Party. That's a huge inroad in any community.
Amen.
We were getting it done, and through those years, we closed the gap in traditionally blue districts and widened it in the red ones. By all historical measures, we were making gains each election cycle, and there was a new accountability to conservative values. When national news came to Suffolk to cover the massive upswelling of support for Governor Youngkin, or for the Youngkin campaign, my successor, Dawn Jones, and I, both, each were interviewed for national news to put faces and voices to this phenomenal titled event. That was interesting later when we were, the message was broadcast everywhere that we would not support Youngkin. It was absurd. It turns out when you're not offending and warring against conservatives, the party grows wildly. We also activated against bad leftist influences in our local government. When Bloomberg-funded Moms Demand Action, led by a self-proclaimed Marxist, promoted a declaration of Gun Violence Awareness Day in Suffolk by the City Council, which tried to sneak it by in the dark, we showed up and declared the reckless danger posed by working with such Soros-funded entities. Soros money is behind the infamous Commonwealth's Attorney of Portsmouth, after all, Stephanie Morales. Nobody needs to be headed down that path. And we showed up and told it. But an odd thing happened then. Thomas Turner expressed anger that we had opposed his family members in their quest to declare Gun Violence Awareness Day for the Marxist Moms Demand Action. He really wished we'd sat that one out. After all, he himself had lost a cousin to gang-related murder by gun. He was furious. He was hot. And so, the one who had wanted to move on, who had first asked me to be part of the party, who, when he got out of the way, allowed his absence encouraged a conservative town to activate and get together. He showed up at the next meeting in front of a bunch of people who'd never seen him before. Just after a report from the events committee, which was explaining that suddenly the Youngkin campaign was strangely quiet about an upcoming fundraiser event that we've been planning with them, Turner stood to make a motion committing money and volunteers to support the Youngkin campaign. So one kind of annoyed member responded, that's what we're all here for, to get Republicans elected. Why do we need to vote? And your motion, it feels like you're twisting my arm, and it doesn't even say how much money you're talking about, what kind of resources are you talking about. But a lot of people didn't get to finish their comments. Turner yelled, squealed even, over other speakers in frustration. He was repeatedly out of order. He insulted people left and right whom he'd never before met. He referred to some of our most dedicated volunteers as the peanut gallery, as he shushed them disrespectfully. How do you think his motion went?
It didn't.
He couldn't have given away keys to Cadillacs at an Oprah show. But 3 votes supported it, including Turner's. The other 2 would become reliable disruptors, as I've been warned by somebody who was starting to help me see what was going on, who worked with Turner and others on a monthly basis to bring division to a unified group. A group that until the night of Turner's ambush had voted unanimously on every single vote for the past 12 months, as it grew from a dozen to 156. As it turned out, Turner had a very difficult time dividing the group from within. And much of that was thanks to some help I got from a new friend I made along the way, who gave me advice on how to hold a group together and how to deal with these kinds of disruptors, to understand what his point was. It was difficult for him, but did he ever try? The next day, my access to RPV data as a chairman for my city, and so thereby the whole unit's access to that data, was shut off mysteriously from RPV. Nobody knew about it. But they all said it could have only been one person, happened to be a close Turner associate. We let it go once it got turned back on. 3rd District Chair Mickey Miller called me the next day, barking like a chicken, suggested we had broken party plan. And when I pushed her on it later, she said, well, you had broken party plan, but we're not going to take action quite yet. Weeks later, I was on the phone with RPV Chair Rich Anderson, who confirmed that both he and Chris Marston was the RPV General Counsel and a close friend of Turner's, and yet both of them totally defended the action and said in at least 2 different ways it was defensible. There was no breach of the party plan. But even as I learned this, it was still being held over my head by my district chair that perhaps we were out of violation and we better stay on a short leash. It was an abuse of power. But even though that Rich Anderson and Chris Marston defended our unit in that action, he did mention how much hard-pressing lobbying he was getting at all hours from a squealing Thomas Turner about it. This blew my mind. What is this all about? This lobbying was an around-the-clock campaign, literally. Emails were forwarded to me from around the state that showed Turner writing people at 3 a.m. about a unit that needed to be dissolved. Campaigns after that were discouraged from coming to our events. We had a delegate out there who was trying to get back the seat that Chris Jones had lost. That was a fundraiser we were putting together for him, and suddenly, not the candidate himself, but his campaign manager said, Miller, we're stuck between you and Richmond. The consultants in Richmond had been pressured by the Youngkin campaign somehow to keep our local candidate from showing up to his local GOP unit's fundraiser for him. And he said it's a really difficult call to make, but we're stuck in the middle. It's just bizarre. Like I said, truth stranger than fiction. The truth's so crazy, I feel crazy standing up here and telling this to you. People were brought into our meetings to shout profanities, sometimes when children were present. We briefly offered a play corner, which was a really good idea, that some people could come after work and their kids could play in the back corner of the room while we had our meeting. Never would have been an issue until some of these planned disruptors started showing up. People repeatedly yelled F-bombs, damaged property, slamming doors, knocking stuff off the wall, stomping through the meeting upset, accused the body at large as liars or racists. Turner himself let out a GD during an invocation that addressed LGBTQ problems in our nation. Stranger than fiction. Through this, conservatives from everywhere, especially across Virginia, reached out. Although the intended effect of the smear lobbying campaign was isolation, and there was some of that, to say the least, conservatives across the state recognized this behavior for exactly what it was. This is what they do. This is their playbook. There were people across the state who'd seen this and didn't bat an eye at it. Through this process, I met your esteemed Chair Waverly. She helped me to understand what otherwise did not make sense. She helped me to see the battle that I had been in from the beginning. And she helped me understand that the sooner we realized what this battle was, the same thing I'd been trying to teach wrestlers I coached all through the years. I've been a wrestling coach all my life. The sooner you realize you're in a battle, the better a chance you have getting through it. But you got to know that you're in one. And then you got to know who's coming after you. She helped me to discern who these people were, although they did this in shadows and whispers, to pick out behaviors in the room that it became clear how these things were orchestrated. So I'm going to hand over the mic to the receipts lady. But I want to encourage you that sometimes the message is so crazy that the messenger seems crazy. But we're surrounded by a political apparatus. They worship at the altar of elected officials. And many in power, particularly in this area, despise conservatives. They don't lock arms with conservatives to defeat Democrats. But they'll lock arms with Democrats to defeat conservatives in their own party.
Amen.
They would rather keep their positions and lose than for the team to win and somebody else be the captain. And that's still just a bizarre truth for me to wrap my mind around. But I've done it with help from this person. And something else I learned along the way, the smear campaigns are the currency of this group. I don't need this group in this room. I mean, in the political arena we see this in. Sometimes the best thing that people can do for themselves to shield themselves from the truth that will be told about them and about how this all works is to smear the messenger and say, that person is out of control, likes to cause trouble, likes to stir it up. And let me tell you something. We would not have made it nearly as long as we did without the help of that woman there. Sometimes I wondered, is she crazy? Am I crazy for listening to her? But we'd have been dead in the water had I not listened to her. And so I encourage you to do two things. One, listen to what she says. Open your eyes and open your ears and hear an uncomfortable truth about the battle that's around you. And two, keep a little list in your head or in your pocket or whatever. Whenever somebody comes up to you and says something not complimentary about your chair, particularly this chair, write that name down. Because that's somebody you can't trust. That's one of the problems, and you can expect them to bring that stuff into your room, one way or the other. Anyway, I'll be available for questions afterwards, if I haven't talked enough already, and pass it on to Dawn.
I'll take over from Miller, just as I did as chairman. So when Miller was a phenomenal chairman, he did a great job. We, my husband and myself, a Navy veteran, we joined the party because we were tired of seeing the things that were going on in our government. And, sorry, I won't move. We were tired of seeing what was going on. And we felt election integrity was extremely important. So we joined the party. Miller was the chairman. Right out the gate, we made the decision, this is the place we wanted to be. The room was full. 100 people in that room, easy. It made it, we felt we were among our own. We had found our home, people that felt, had the same values as us. This is where we belong. I became the events chair. So when Miller talks about those fundraisers and those things like that, I was deeply involved in that. I was the events chair. I was the one that was out there trying to get these fundraisers, these companies to volunteer, donate, and so forth. So when we were told that this particular delegate, this candidate for delegate, was not going to take a fundraiser for his campaign due to the elites in Richmond, the people, the very people we thought were ours, were us, was very disappointing. So that was the first clue that there was something really going on. That was even before I think I even met Waverly. I started kind of figuring out there's something not right here. So Miller is correct. There's an apparatus that's working to undermine. So one of the things that happened when Miller asked me to become, his next in line, I guess, the one to take over, we had great conversation. I said, I really want to ask you some questions. So we sat down and we talked. He tried to tell me some of these things. And I'm going to be honest, I thought he was crazy. I don't quite understand the severity of it. It really runs deep. I decided to do it. Won the chairmanship, started right out the gate, my first meeting. The individuals in the room were causing problems. As things went along, my husband was actually the treasurer. And just to kind of let you know, these are all of our Suffolk people. Joe here was our membership. My husband Jerry was treasurer, and obviously Miller was my vice chair. So we were invested in this GOP unit. My husband being treasurer, we were trying to get those little squares for fundraisers and for events that we were doing to work. We couldn't understand how come they weren't working. My husband, it took weeks, probably months, that he finally, with the bank, found out we didn't have an EIN. The EIN that they had been using all these other times was to a man that had been in the unit and had been dead for 10 years. It was his social security number. So that was our first clue. We got some problems. So my husband got that all cleared up. We got that all taken care of. We got an official EIN. We were good to go. The next task that happened, I became chairman in March of 22. June of 22, one of the Democrats on the electoral board passed away. Youngkin was now in office, so we didn't have to wait to December to put somebody in there. We had the opportunity to replace that Democrat with a Republican, so we would have 2 Republicans. The party wouldn't help us. They sent, the AG's office, Jason Mieres, sent an attorney, Jeff Leif. He filed some paperwork. We went to court in Isle of Wight, and we were there for a total of maybe 5 minutes. The judge literally said, I don't have jurisdiction. That was the last we ever heard from Jeff Leif or the Attorney General's office on the subject. We had to wait till January to appoint our person. We also, that November, prior to us being able to appoint, we had an election. So we could have had 2 Republicans on there, and we did not. We ended up with 2 Democrats. One of the big things that we found through the process was, as Miller pointed out, candidates. We couldn't get signs from any of them. So Kiggins was the #1. I'm just going to say it. We, for whatever reason, could not get signs. So you guys know, I mean, I only have in Suffolk 30 precincts. Nothing like what you guys have. But 30 precincts is still quite a bit. I had 0 signs. So I talked to everybody. I emailed everybody, including Emily Brewer. I need signs. I need signs. I finally, at a 2nd district meeting, ganged up on Dennis Free because he had talked about it in the meeting that he had some in his trunk. So I stood outside his car at his trunk to get signs. I got 25 signs. That's what I had for 30 precincts. I was told on election day that they were given to Thomas Turner. So I contacted Thomas Turner. He said, no, we gave those to one of the candidates. I called that candidate. He said, I was told only to put them at certain precincts. Never did get signs. But we didn't support the candidates.
That was the narrative.
That was the narrative. I know that you guys really want to hear about the case. I did bring a copy of the appeal that you guys are welcome to look at. It's 96 pages. It talks about everything that we've just talked about here, and it shows where we did support candidates. It shows all of the facts. They state, when they decided to disband us, that we had drafted a censure, or that we had censured Todd Gilbert, the anointed one. We did not. We voted to draft a censure. The censure was never written. True leadership from the party, knowing that I was a first-year chairman, what they should have done is they should have contacted me. They should have said, you know, this may not be a good idea, you know, you may want to look at your, you know, bylaws, you might want to, these are, you know, the way we would view it. Do you think I received any call as such? No. Again, we never did a censure. It was never written. They continue to distort facts. I have a court case here as well, but they continue to distort facts about what truly did happen. Miller did a great outline of exactly what had occurred over the time frame. When I took over, all the same tactics were used in every meeting. We were continually fighting. We would have 5 to 6 hour board meetings trying to understand where are they going to come from next? What are we going to have to try and battle? We wanted to support our local candidates. We wanted to support our community. We wanted to help our state and our country. And we were continually battling that group of individuals. They tried to smear us across the state, obviously. But they never, ever once came to us and gave us any aid on how to do anything. When we were contacted about the disbanding, as you guys know, there was a race that was for Senate, and that was between Emily Brewer and Hermes Sadler. The understanding that I have of the party plan is, as a candidate, we can choose our candidates. I'm allowed to vote for any candidate I choose. But once they become the nominee, we as a party support that nominee. It says it right in the party plan. I never, ever even met Hermes Sadler till the first time he came to our GOP to speak to our unit. Miller was our vice chair, but he was also our candidate recruitment. He had talked to Hermes several times. I had not. Emily Brewer chose not to come to our meetings. She came to one in a year. She was never told she couldn't. She just chose not to. So as a candidate, he had every right to come speak at our unit meeting, and we allowed it. After that, it was no holds barred for them. And that's when things got real ugly. We received a phone call finally. Well, I actually received an email from Dennis Freed, and all it said was, I want you to tell me why you wrote a censure. And that was it. Well, I don't know about you guys, but that's rude. You know, talk to me politely. We can have conversation. Let's be adults. I did not respond to that. The day after that is when I received an email stating that they were issuing the paperwork to disband us. So we wrote this lovely appeal based on the charges that they stated. One was that we wrote a censure. Again, we did not write a censure. We did not censure anybody. We voted per the party plan. If a motion is brought to the chairman, I have no vote, by the way. I facilitate the meeting. That's all I do. There was a vote to draft a censure, which again, never got written. So in the appeal, we supported candidates. That was one of the other things that they came at us with. Remember what Miller was saying. We tried to support candidates. I tried to get signs. We tried to give money. And they wouldn't take it. They wouldn't give us signs. So I get very passionate about this because when you're doing all the things, what a frustrating thing when you're being accused of crimes you haven't committed, in a sense. And the whole group, 156 people. This is just a table full. But to look at these people and say, they're going to throw you out of the party for something none of us have done is a very hard thing to live with. And as a chairman, I felt very responsible. Like, you know, it was very emotional for me. So, the appeal shows they're incorrect. I did show up to the 2nd District meeting. We had probably 25 individuals in the room. It is run, it's very strict. You can't record, nobody can speak. He literally, Dennis Free is the he, had armed policemen there with Kevlar vests. So we were in the room. It looked like I had leprosy because the tables were in a U, and I sat here, and if we would have been on a boat, we'd have tipped over because nobody sat around me. And I mean, I gave a statement. It was a very strong statement. I was very passionate about it. But part of the accusation was things that were supposedly done while Miller was chairman. So they were asking me questions about this, and I kept saying to them, I was not chairman at that time. I was not privy to that information. I do not know. Poor Miller tried to speak and literally was told by Dennis Freed that if he tried one more time, he was going to be removed physically from the room. So Miller is trying to write it to me on notes so that I could answer these questions. It was quite the sight, I'm sure. But that is how that meeting was ran. So their distorted truth of that is, I had the right to speak. Yeah, I did, but not on everything that I was privy to the information or the answers for. So, yeah, they gave me the right to speak, but some of it I couldn't speak to. They never allowed Miller to speak on it. Not only that, but they were disbanding us and having me, in a sense, stand trial for something that I wasn't even in charge of. I thought that was, extremely telling as well. They were trying to remove us just to remove us at that point. And it was obvious. We knew we were not going to win. I was the only dissenting vote. And then I was promptly told that I could not vote anymore because I was now officially disbanded. So any other items that were brought to the table, I did vote, but they didn't count it. Then, part of it was because of that race that I was saying between Emily Brewer. I was also considered the LDC chair because Suffolk held the majority of the percentage in that district for Senate race between Emily Brewer and Hermie Sadler. So there were several, Brunswick, Isle of Wight, there were several, obviously, units that were part of this district for the LDC. I was the chair of that. We did vote to primary. They were not happy with that because they wanted a convention. We had actually heard through grapevine that they wanted a convention because they were going to prevent any of Hermie Sadler's delegates to be present. So at that LDC meeting, I filed to the State Board of Elections for a primary. Eric Brazel from Brunswick, the chair of Brunswick, was sitting right next to me. And the representative for Portsmouth, it was Lee Talley, was sitting on the other side of me when I filed it. Filed it right from my phone. And per the law, I'm the only one. They never argued that I wasn't the legitimate LDC chair. Because the Suffolk GOP chair and the LDC chair are two separate things. So they could not remove me as the LDC chair. So when we filed as primary, we're thinking, okay, it's a primary, they can't cheat that process, that's great. The next day, I received a call, and they said, you're not going to believe this. But word came down through Yunkin and Mieras to Susan Beals, who is the head of the State Board of Elections. They threatened her job if she did not change it back to a convention. And so she did it. So I had an option, and I sued him. And I won. The judge agreed. So I can tell you, when I talked to my attorney about this, I had to ask him, I have people that are counting on me, but I have a family. How can they come after me personally? How can they, And he told me, he said, if they do, I will support you pro bono. We'll go after them. It's huge. But the judge agreed. I had I was the only one legally, so they changed it back to a primary. So we had a primary. Now, I will tell you, Emily Brewer won, but at least we know that she won fair and square. Well, as much as possible. But that shows you at the depths that they'll go. So when we tell you that we thought we were in crazy town, this is our own. This isn't the Democrats. I didn't even get a chance to fight the Democrats. I was too busy fighting us. That's where it became crazy town. I thought these people were, I was home. These were my people. These were the people that had the same values and thoughts, and they didn't. And that was, I think, a total, it was very sad, I guess would be the best way to say it. It was very sad in a lot of ways. So one of the things that I will tell you is I have a letter currently by the 5th District Chairman, Rick Buchanan. He wanted me to bring that here tonight. He sent that to me Tuesday night. They're pulling the same shenanigans again, only this time in the 5th District, which is one of the most conservative districts we have here in the state of Virginia.
That's what Lynchburg.
Mhm.
That's where McGuire.
Yes, correct. They are pulling the same shenanigans up there. And he has sent this letter out to the SCC.
State Central Committee.
Correct. And when he sent that letter out, we received a response back from Dennis Free. And I'm not gonna read the whole thing to you. Needless to say, some of the items in there, because it was almost verbatim some of the things that had happened to us that they're trying to do in other districts, like the 42nd, the 43rd. There's been chairmans removed, not whole units, but chairmans and different things for the same types of stuff. He distorts the truth and makes it look like we somehow are not, not correct. And Dennis Free, sorry. The he is Dennis Free.
He's crooked as it gets.
Yeah.
Right.
Just making sure I was.
Yes. He tells you what's good for you.
Correct.
No.
Correct.
Breaks your leg. Well, he tried to make it.
Breaks your leg, tell you to walk out the room. Right. So his response basically goes into the same narrative that they've been, stating all along. And that narrative is that somehow we didn't support candidates. We wrote a censure. We did not write a censure. It was never written. I can't say that enough. And we voted only to draft one, which never happened. I can go through any question at any time. You can have my email, you can have my phone number. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you would have about anything that they say that we did or didn't do. I think Miller was very clear. It started right from the beginning once he got in. It continued when I got in. It never stopped. So I'm going to say, one of the last things I am going to say, though, is we, for a year, had nothing to do with the party. We stayed completely away. We formed our own group. The majority of us came over to the 1974. So their little band is probably back at about the 12 members. We did show up when we were trying to support Patty Lyman and Waverly when they were trying to hide the delegate forms for the RNC vote, for the convention. And we happened to get wind, finally, of where that meeting was going to be. And so we showed up in force. And not to sound funny, but I think they peed themselves. Because we had twice as many people in that room as what they had.
Suffolk delivered.
And we shocked them. They didn't expect us to show up. But I will always stand for everybody's right to vote. You can't take that from them. And they surely are not going to take that from them. And so we showed up. They didn't know what to do. And we got the delegate forms. So then we did show up to the convention, and we helped Suffolk was the only in the 2nd district that went for party alignment.
That's right.
And it's because we showed up. So, yeah. I have to give credit to people like Waverly and this group right here. They did a phenomenal job. They've always shown up. They've always supported us as a board, as a group, as friends. So I just want to point this out too. My husband has went to several meetings, and some of the other individuals. Per the party plan, it should be a public meeting, correct?
Yeah.
They hide their meetings.
Yes.
They don't announce them, and they're moving them from place to place so we can't show up.
Yep.
FOIA their minutes. By law, they have to keep 7 years. FOIA their minutes. They have to give them to you upon
Well,
request.
I'm all about it.
At this point, it really doesn't
can't.
matter,
FOIA.
because it's a waste of our time to go there anyway.
Well, this is my thing, as my husband said. He wants to show up because he wants to see, what are they doing? What are they doing? What are they doing for Suffolk? Because we don't see them. On election day, we had 2 candidates, 2 very strong conservative candidates. One of them was for school board. Let me tell you, they brought another candidate that they gave money to as a conservative. So we had to fight a conservative and a Democrat. And that gentleman had 32 different arrests on his record. We won by 57 votes, by the skin of our teeth, but it took everything we had to win. And now we have a conservative majority on the Suffolk School Board. No thanks to them. The other conservative, which was the only conservative running for city council, you know what they did? They wouldn't even let him speak at the meetings. Never let him speak. So this is what they're doing now, is they're hiding. My husband, at one of the candidate forums, he confronted the vice chairman, Rod Thompson. Rod Thompson said, they're afraid you're going to come in, take over, and go rogue again.
Rogue.
Verbatim is what they said. Again, yeah. So this is what is going on. So we've made the decision that we would prefer to do our own thing. But we're bringing candidates. We're bringing strong conservative candidates. We're winning. They didn't win one candidate. We did.
Amen.
That's the difference.
Are we ready for
Sean
questions?
McGee and Jason Wooldridge. Sean McGee is the school board. He did win.
And he's now the
And he's
vice
now the
chair.
vice chairman of the school board too.
Yep. You want to take some questions? Anybody? Vic first, and then let's go around.
Couple of things real quick.
Yeah.
I can vouch that everything they said it was true. One thing that has been left out, there were asked whoever wanted to would sign and back them up on some court papers. And when she talked about 150 some, there was over 120 to 130 of them put their names to a legal document saying what they did was true. Everything of what they said. So that. Could you also talk about your 2 constitutional days? Because those were something you didn't mention that I think y'all, would be a good thing to like either bring back or do something, or just a half a day. But these were outstanding. And this is something that I haven't seen anywhere else. And you might want to see what they do with that.
Yeah. So we actually had on Constitution Day, we had a Constitution Day event where we were with the SRP. The first one was when Miller was still chair and I was the bench chair, and then the second one when I was chair. Miller's father actually has a lovely farm that he allowed us to have the event at, and it's kind of in the heart of Suffolk. It's a great area. And we had vendors out there, we had speakers out there. So what we did is we had individuals that were running for office, such as the Emily Brewers and so forth. But what we did is, it wasn't so much a stump speech, we asked them to actually talk about the Constitution. So instead of just talking about, some sort of, traditional stump speech that they would give at an event, tell us what's your favorite part of the Constitution and why. And it was great. We had, it was a phenomenal event the first year. The second year, we were in battles with the group, we'll call them, and so it was tougher. They were actively recruiting people not to show up and make it a good event. So we couldn't get Jen Kiggins to actually speak. She would not commit to a time. She did show up, but she stood off to the side and did not speak. So
You
she
did
never
get-
re-asked us.
You did get like lieutenant governor and
We
stuff
did.
that was running from Northern Virginia and stuff.
Patty
They
Lyman.
came down,
Yeah,
it was a lot of people.
Sergio De La Pena,
Yeah.
the first year.
Penny, all the,
Penny, yeah.
yeah, so they were
Yeah.
getting people from